Hello, every folks, and welcome to a bit of a talk on Prevailing Element here, a bit of a study, if you will. Look, here's the thing. I decided to start this off with the PSP version here because I want to be clear that this is a mechanic that's, it's weird and it's very temperamental. Basically, sometimes it just won't do a thing, sometimes it'll do a lot. Basically, testing it is a bit of a funky time. Now, originally, when I was going and testing things out on like this and One Vision and all that, the answer was very clear in terms of it's boosting one particular element type. And originally, I was testing it with Hellhound and Wisplight. So here's the thing. All of the elements seem to function differently when it comes to Prevailing Element. In fact, I'm not entirely convinced that sometimes it just doesn't work in reverse. It's always been a bit of a funky mechanic, but on paper the way it's supposed to be is that whenever an element is used on any particular map, it effectively goes up by a score, usually about, I believe, 6 is the highest. So, like on the low end, we're talking about things like Spark Spheres and stuff like that, raising it up by 1 or 2. And then we're talking things like top-end Draconics and Apocrypha, raising it up by anywhere from like 4 to 6. So this is every time they're used. And this also actually includes elemental finishers as well. But the basic idea is supposed to be that whatever effect it happens to have, it will raise or lower the maximum hit of a particular element. Sometimes it has an effect, sometimes it doesn't. Like, for example, in this particular case, this is the PSP version, if it wasn't clear. In this particular case, we have Deneb, which I love how they actually will just, like, take a moment to freeze time here. Like, if we reset the turn and look at that again real quick, look at the people walking in the background. Like, this is, again, there were all these little things in PSP that I just absolutely loved, but they go ahead and they do this, and suddenly it's like, oh, hang on, they are one with nature, everything around them has stopped, and then you turn it back on, and then all the lightning comes on, it's like, oh, wait, they just had their moment. It's, you know, it's just, it's cute. Anyway, so, point being, it make number go up. Now, the thing is, before, like in this particular case, I was going to use this as an example of like, hey, you know, here's how it used to work back in the PSP version. However, that's not always the case. You see, by itself, before Spellcraft, before all this other stuff, because she didn't have herpetology on her, she wasn't fully penetrating this guy's armor with the spells that she's using, apparently. You basically have to have already penetrated whatever the armor value is. You have to be more or less free-flowing in the scaling phase of the damage calculation. Yeah, don't worry, this is not going to get confusing at all. And yeah, at that point, your very possible maximum hit will end up going up based on the spell that was used, or based on how good Prevailing Element is going, to a degree that ends up getting pretty nutso. Like, you can eventually end up seeing stuff, you know, like an extra 100 on your summon damage and things like that, which mattered a whole lot in this version. But the point is, it's a very finicky mechanic that's never, like, they never fully made a huge deal of it. It's just sort of a thing that's going on in the background. So, like, right here, it's not really necessarily helping her out, even though it's maximized Prevailing Element for fire currently. But basically, all we want to do is prove that whether or not it exists in Reborn, so that's exactly what we're going to be trying to do here. Let's go ahead and switch back over to the Switch, no pun intended. Alright, so here we are in HD land. So here's the deal. Here's what I'm kind of expecting in this particular scenario. When it comes to interactions, what it did in the past was they would basically scale up the maximum and minimum of a lot of different weapons. Now, light and dark are going to be the most intense of the different elements, as far as I can tell anyway. Please bear in mind that at any point, if there happens to be more information that you happen to have on hand, please do share it. This is a mechanic that's, quite frankly, very poorly understood, but as far as I'm aware, I have never seen it actually function in any way in Reborn so far, whereas it would kind of come up occasionally back in the PSP version. Anyway, light and dark, as far as my experience tells, have been the most intense, so what we're going to do is essentially stack Prevailing Element light as much as possible, and just kind of see how it interacts. If we can see any interaction whatsoever, then we can at least confirm that the mechanic does something. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've taken Miss Jen Hitmore over here, who is going to be our test dummy for this particular thing. She is rolling the Stinky set in order to be invisible to the AI. Mostly because a level 1 has a tendency to get killed off long before you can set a prevailing element of this magnitude, and quite frankly, the defenses on this should not be enough to fully resist everything these guys are doing. So anyway, hopefully this will be fine. Otherwise, you know, we'll find other ways to test it. It's not perfect, it's definitely flawed, but either way, this map is particularly handy for this because we can leave one unit alive, and we can go ahead and have our two units charging up Prevailing Element standing in the center of the map. Now, why is that important? Well, it turns out that the actual functions for summon are very similar to how they were in the PSP version. Or not the PSP version, but the SNES version. Basically, if you target nothing with your summon, it will be the same thing as just improving your affinity with that element. Now, this mattered a decent bit more in PSP because of all of the kind of... We kind of had a general idea on how to penetrate armor in that one. Obviously, stuff has changed a little bit this time around, so, you know, things are slightly different. But point being, we have two units with functionally infinite MP who are going to sit in the center of the map and just kind of see if anything happens. Actually, just noticed I forgot to set up a baseline here as far as how their hits go, so we'll go ahead and do that next round. They haven't summoned anything yet, so currently Prevailing Element should not be anything. Now, this goes on a scale from 0 to 100, and I'm just going to count it manually instead of having a shaman in the party. If you have a shaman, you can tell the exact numbers. And unfortunately, there's no visual indicator this time around, which is a little bit annoying, because back in the PSP version, it would just stack the same icon, like 3 next to each other, if it was pretty much completely maxed out. Anyway, so let's go ahead and test this out. So with the Dark Spear, we're starting off at 900 for going against our test dummy. So I'll go ahead and have him take his turn right here. Then he'll go ahead and start spamming all the different types of spells just to see what does what exactly. I previously went ahead and tested all those spells, by the way, and came to a conclusion that they were literally the exact same values that they were in PSP. Namely that basic spells were typically doing 2, medium spells typically were doing 4, and then the most advanced spells, so like things like Starfall 2, things like Heaven Judge 2, and all of that, those tended to boost it up by 6. And so it basically boosts either 2, 4, or 6, and then the opposing element goes down by 1. In theory, that's how it's supposed to go anyway. So, in this particular case, the Holy Lance is doing 998. Go ahead and put that on there. And there we go. So, just so we're clear, by the way, I did this test without switching her element, and her hit without the element was 786. So it's pretty consistently around the 200 ballpark that you get for going and doing this particular kind of interaction here. Now, this also happens to be the same as a verse, so this actually makes me think that perhaps there's a possibility that the way that they actually implemented this system into the game might be very similar to how they did a lot of things for One Vision, namely that they were taking the existing engine and then they were essentially like reworking mechanics of like you take one piece of this, and then you attach them together. So personally, for example, my theory on how they handled something like let's say the pincer mechanic was I'm pretty sure they took out sneak attack and then basically took the check if behind unit mechanic and then combined it with let's say a counterattack mechanic because they are ranked the same way as counterattack. So they probably just added a second call for that counterattack and then just essentially combined it with that back thing. You know, there you go, suddenly a pincer thing. And this is similar to how One Vision handled a lot of its features. So like, for example, you know how the shamans control the weather in the One Vision mod. So that isn't actually a custom thing. A lot of stuff is hard-coded, and he couldn't just add stuff in there. It's essentially Legoed together from existing parts. So in that particular case, we're looking at... oh, and I should probably test this too. So non-affiliated Heaven Judge, before we get started, is 571. Just to test that out here. Obviously, this test is not going to be perfect, but either way. We'll get to more of it as we go. But anyway, what I was saying is so like how they can control the weather in that one was basically taking the function of Gamp's map-wide like pissed off stagger debuff and applying that to the weather effect from stuff like the horn and the harp, essentially allowing those two things to be combined in a way where suddenly it's like, oh hey look, the rain came down and lowered accuracy, also everyone's been hit by stagger. And so you had this cool thing where suddenly the shamans had all of this extra flavor to them, where they were just like coming down, they're like, you know, just the weather comes down and everyone's accuracy is suddenly dog shit. And, you know, it's just great, you know, that kind of stuff is, again, whenever you hear folks saying that One Vision is the definitive Tactics Ogre experience, like, yeah, look, there's 100% a reason for that. Officially, I would say that this is the one that's the most presentable to people, and one that I would, again, officially consider the most definitive one for people to start with, but man, oh man, just the sheer feature density of One Vision is just something you very rarely ever get to see. Anyway, so, they went ahead and did a 194, so that's not going to really tell us anything right now. I should not pick that up. Yeah, we're going to pick up no cards on him just to make sure that that's not a factor. We will go ahead and... do we want that extra MP? I'm going to try not to pick up the mind card to avoid seeing any numbers move too. Alright. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and finish off 2 of these units, leave 1 of them alive, and then we can start maxing this thing out. And again, I'm just going to count it manually. I'm going to go and cast the more advanced versions 25 times. That always makes me a little bit nervous. But we're going to do the more advanced versions 25 times, and then we'll kind of go from there. We've gotten a very minimum amount of stuff done. We just cleared out the map here, so let's see. Holy Lance at this point is showing 1066. That's a good sign. Okay, we're seeing some maneuvers there. I would absolutely love to be wrong on this, so that'd be awesome if this continues to be consistent. So, okay, that seems to be happening. Now, we're unclear if it's specifically for the weapon or the affinity type. So, I forgot to mention, or rather, I forgot to finish what I was talking about earlier. By the way, part of the reason that I went ahead and used spears for this is simply because they have the counter, but they don't actually have the counter. But in this case... oh, he's at 78 right now. Okay, whatever. We'll just move over here. I believe the way that they actually implemented the element system into this game, because it's funny, they've kind of implemented it the same way in all versions. It's just kind of been a bit of a long road to get to the same spot, if that makes sense. So back in the SNES version, basically all that it was doing was saying, like, hey, you basically get, like, +4 to your offensive or defensive value, depending on element. Obviously, that doesn't matter very much. I mean, health was a decent bit lower in that one, but still, obviously that's not going to be the biggest deal in the world, right? So, effectively, what ended up happening there was that, yeah, it was just that tiny bonus, but then they took that tiny bonus and they changed it into ranks, so you could essentially rank it up in the PSP version. Okay, this is still showing 900. Alright, and then let's see what Heaven Judge is doing, to see if this is actually fully attached or not. So Heaven Judge is showing 626. Okay, so I will say, having tested other elements, I haven't seen it yet, but so far, Holy does seem to actually be doing something. But let's go ahead and max this out and see how far it goes. Anyway, so, man, Holy might still be the best element after all. Okay. So I believe that the way that they did it was that they took the call for a verse and basically allowed it to be double stacked. Basically each person's element is effectively a buff and an averse for that particular element. And it might just be averse specifically because obviously they're only weak to one thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be strong against the other thing if the other one's just weak to it. Weaknesses weren't really a thing in the PSP version, and they were barely a thing in the original. So I believe that's how they handled it. It seems to make sense on a technical level. Either way, so let's see. We are currently up to approximately Prevailing Element, should be around 50 or so right now. So let's see. Holy Lands, how's that looking at this point? 1,103. So we can confirm that this is, in fact, actually doing something. We'll go ahead and confirm exact point values in just a sec here. So 1,103. We'll go ahead and take no action with Festa next round and see how it behaves. But anyway, the reason that I mentioned this is because when I was doing the archer tests, I was noticing consistently that when all scaling is going freeform, it's about 200 that they're getting, which happens, again, to be exactly the same as the averse. So, I mean, it seems legit to me, is the thing. Anyway, let's see. Okay, So that should have gone up by 6. It was a difference of 12. So you're roughly getting 2 damage points per each prevailing element stack. I'm really glad that this is actually working this way. It seems to only participate in cases where the other unit is weak so far, though. Again, this might just be a breakthrough thing. There might be a threshold system, so please don't take everything at, like, this is all it's doing kind of a value. Realistically speaking, it might only be a bonus and it's not necessarily removing dark like it should right now, or maybe the weapon itself is not affected. It's hard to say for sure. I don't have any dark spells on hand to check. Also, additionally, accuracy's never been affected by Prevailing Element, so there's no reason to think it would be. Either way, so currently it is still showing 900 for all those situations. Now I'm going to go ahead and max it out and just kind of see how far it goes. So, as far as the kind of lowering part of it there, this has kind of always been a function, but also kind of hasn't been. That is to say, it seems to take quite a bit for it to actually lower, and again, there's a lot of kind of hidden thresholds that we have no real way of knowing about. Just because it's one of these cases of, like, you discover one thing and it gives you the kind of idea of what there is to look for somewhere else. So in this particular case, I don't know why light seems to be more intense than the other elements. I guess, I don't know, maybe they just spent so long in the programming dungeon that it just sort of seemed like the most immersive way to go about it. Who friggin' knows, to be honest. But either way, we'll just keep on stacking this up here. I'll go ahead and cut it right here, come back when it's maxed out. Okay, currently we should be pretty close to maxed out here, so I'm currently showing 1244. I'll go ahead and cast it a couple more times here just to see if it actually does anything. But yes, it's already a pretty meaty extra 300 damage that she's doing there. So this is definitely functioning, so that kind of brings to mind that there must be more thresholds that we're not aware of then. So I know that it caps out at 99 in this one, but it was capped out... Okay, so yeah. So 1244. In total, she got... It's actually 246. So she got 246 extra damage off of Prevailing Element. So 246 divided by 99. What? Alright, and further good news, because I forgot to confirm this bit, but yes, Heaven Judge has gone up from 626, or from originally 571, all the way up to 763. Probably some decimal-related nonsense, and I'm actually not sure if the weapons themselves are scaled differently this time around, because you could downscale opposing weapons in the PSP version. It is possible that's not a function anymore this time. Like, for example, I noticed this particularly when playing the One Vision mod, using a Holy Hammer through Palace of the Dead, and this led to a situation where they would spam Word of Pain so damn much that, or Dark Side at this point, that it would basically cause holy weapons to become near worthless. So it was very rare that would come up under any other circumstance. In this particular case, it looks like we're instead getting a bonus on the physical side of roughly 2.48 per affinity point towards that element. Because again, it's capping out at 99 instead of 100 this time. It's a weird little detail. Maybe it does go up to 100, or maybe it just goes 99.9. I don't know. It only counts up to 99 is all I'm really aware of. There's always decimal stuff in the background that we can't quite account for. And then on the magic side, it's 1.93 per affinity point. So we can more or less just go ahead and call it a roughly 2.5 on the physical side and 2 on the magical side. Okay, there we go. We got some actual data out of this. Go figure. We did a data, folks. Now, how the hell did friggin' weapon elements work? So it only seems to have an effect on the boost so far. It's unclear how much of an effect it has defense-wise. Like right here, I believe what's going on here, and I'm not 100% sure on this. Like, let's take a look at this spear, see if we might be able to suss out what's going on there, because it might be... Like, I would say it's supposed to be like a scaling difference, but that doesn't necessarily make sense either. Because it does have 27% extra scaling there, but, I don't know. I don't know. It could be, let's see, 127... 90, what's that, 106, 124. I mean, it's like, it's right on the line for the Dark Spear here. Although his attack value should be pushing it past the hard armor value. I mean, it could just be that it's so close that it simply doesn't affect this thing, that it isn't getting the scaling that it should be getting. But then again, elemental scaling on weapons seems to be a bit jacked up at the moment and doesn't seem to apply. Okay, so one more quick test. I was curious because I was looking, I was actually editing the video, and looking through it, I noticed that I had still left his greatsword skill instead of spears, which maybe meant that it actually wasn't getting the bonuses that it should have. So I went ahead and tested this, so like it's 932 right now as a base value. Now, that has not started scaling up, which is basically telling me that there is a non-zero chance that she is effectively fully armored against this particular thing, that there may be an additional kind of armor value at play here. Because he's not getting any, as far as I can tell anyway, he's not getting any additional scaling off this. Either way, we're going to go ahead and use some kind of light affiliated stuff. We're going to see if this moves any. And then after that, I want to test it again without the armor and see if that really is what's going on there. A bit of a funny thing, by the way. Back in the PSP version, that would actually scatter fire instead of actually following a pattern. Like in this one, it will alternate and just kind of go down the list of different enemies, which makes summons pretty good for wrapping up fights. Like that is to say, if you got a bunch of weak units, you can be pretty well sure it's going to hit all of them. In the PSP version, it was just like, well, that guy's at low health, those three are at medium health. I'm going to hit the guy on low health and then hit the ground 3 times. So it was kind of a very scattershot type of deal. But anyway. So let's see, still 932 with a single summon. That's honestly to be expected. Let's go ahead and move on here. Before it gets thrown out there. The actual intensity of the damage has no effect on the Prevailing Element. It's just whatever the particular function happens to be of that particular spell. So they all just have a score attached to them. So we're still showing 932. We probably should be in the 40s Prevailing Element-wise, but okay. I'm going to say it's pretty reasonable to assume at this point that it's probably not going to be moving anywhere if it hasn't yet, because this is around the point when we definitely started seeing movement last time. So I'm going to give it one more round of summons and see if we see anything at all, but I have a feeling that yes, it is currently not freeform scaling because of the armor. So we'll do that, and then we'll test it without the armor and see what that gets us here. Here we go again. No armor, no stats, massive disadvantage. It feels like potentially armor value. I really hope this is the case if this actually was showing that much of a difference. So we're showing 1074 at this point. And again, he's got his proper spear skill equipped and stuff. Wait, does he? Why is he not showing his finishers? What's that about? Oh, they're right here. I'm just being dumb. Okay, anyway. So, point being, he's got all of his stuff on at this point. So we're showing 1074 on a basic attack. We're going to throw a few summons out there. If we see any movement at all, then we've got success. Otherwise, we'll just assume that there's no defensive component to Prevailing Element, or it's not downscaling like it should. Okay, so I tested it on the other map to see how high it might potentially go. I tested to see if maybe it was some lower value getting canceled out in training here. So the difference between 0 and 60 seems to be non-existent, so that's kind of telling me that it's getting either completely blocked by something or has no function there whatsoever. Alright, next thing that I want to see. On the offensive side in the PSP version, the element of the weapon would get boosted regardless of the augment of the unit used. Now, if they're combined or not, we should potentially see something here. So he's showing 1287 with this two-hander. If he's at 20, let's see where we or we look at on a normal map. Okay, so here we are in a neutral element map, and we're seeing 1209. So it is affecting the bonus of the weapon separately. He is off element, so he should not be getting an individual bonus. Let's see, 09. So this one, that 20 was, yeah, still following that that same formula. So it is boosting the weapon, not particularly the unit itself. So I mean that matches up. Either way, that's solid. I mean, definitely matches what I've been seeing in some situations. Okay, further testing, see if we can maybe get this to appear for other elements finally. Alright, so the next test is essentially to see if the weapon by itself, getting the Prevailing Element bonus, is affected regardless of the opponent's weaknesses. So in this case I have the Shauna, which is a water sword. The instill shouldn't really matter here, so we're going to start off with a baseline here of 1090 versus... Okay, so here's where things get a little bit weird, because it does seem to be functioning only for light at this point. So I've gone and tested a few different elements, but like, for example, using the Shauna, again, we can test on element and off element. We'll do that in just a sec here. But testing it against her, you know, 1090 at this point, so not really getting anything extra from the Prevailing Element water here. Anyway, let's go ahead and... come to think of it, I never did test it in the Fire Fortress. Let's go test that real quick. Okay, so still a dud in the Lightning Fortress as well. I went ahead and tested ice for good measure, and nothing there. So why am I doing all of that? Basically, I'm checking to see if any elements were potentially mixed up somewhere along the lines here, because this doesn't particularly make any sense. If it was an armor thing, then surely some of these other elements might be showing up. If it was a case like sometimes in the PSP version, you would effectively just be lowering the opposite element and not necessarily boosting your own, then perhaps that interaction might be there as well. But I can't find any interaction behind any of these elements aside from light and dark being boosted in their particular respective situations. There, again, might just be a far higher threshold for the other elements to potentially show up. I don't know. I have no idea what exactly is going on there, but I've tested that you seem to be able to get an effect out of both light and dark for their Prevailing Element, meaning for Sand Bronze and Palace of the Dead it's very noticeable. But for the other ones, I can't find any interaction so far. If you happen to have any other data, please go ahead and provide it. I would be happy to test it, follow up on this, all of that kind of thing. But that's all I got for now. Anyway, y'all have a good one. Take care. I'll see you then. Or at least doesn't always apply. I'm not entirely sure, to be completely honest. Everyone's accounts seem to vary on this, but I can confirm at the very least the Prevailing Element for light seems to be functioning properly. I wasn't able to get this to work for water. Again, I don't know why the values were more extreme for water. It's unclear. I'm completely unclear on that particular one. But either way, whatever this happens to explain, there we go. Trying to think interaction-wise how this would make any sense. I feel like some of the kind of data mining folks might be able to maybe put some more pieces together off of this, but it has an interaction. It has a function. Again, I'm not really sure why they left it as there's just one element instead of showing you the triple stack once they're fully maxed out, but it clearly is ticking up. It does function, kind of. I don't know why it's not doing that for the other elements. So either way, whatever this happens to mean, there you go. So y'all have a good one. Take care. Hopefully this at least gets us one step further to understanding what the hell's going on here. This is what it's supposed to do for most different elements. But again, please bear in mind that this mechanic was always funky even in the PSP version. I remember there was one update for One Vision where it straight up started working backwards. Like, it's just a weird mechanic that, as far as I'm aware, nobody really fully understands. So, either way, I just thought this was an interesting bit of news. Y'all have a good one. Take care.